The very first time I saw my daughter's face light up with hope, it was when she was told her surgery fund had reached its goal. But the very next day, that hope was gone. My husband stole our daughter's medical fund. He didn't just take the money, he took a future and a life. He thought he got away with it, but he had no idea he was playing a game with the wrong person. He thought he had outsmarted me, but what he didn't know was that my little girl's life was protected by someone far more powerful than him, someone he had pushed away long ago. And it was all revealed on the night of the biggest party of his life, when I received a call that started with a confession and ended with a scream. If you've ever been betrayed by a loved one, let's get this out in the open. Comment down below what you've had to fight for. This is a story about a family torn apart by greed and healed by a truth so shocking it will leave you speechless. This story is for anyone who needs to know that no matter what you lose, you can always get it back. I'm telling this story to show that my husband stole our daughter's medical fund, but he couldn't steal our hope. This is a journey from rock bottom to ultimate justice. If you want to witness how the most ruthless betrayal led to the most satisfying revenge, then hit that subscribe button. It all started so simply. My name is Claire, and for the past 3 years, my world has revolved around 2 people, my 7-year-old daughter, Lily, and her father, Michael. We were divorced, but we had a good system, or so I thought. Our separation was amicable, and we co-parented Lily with a shared goal, getting her the bone marrow transplant she needed. Lily was born with a rare genetic disorder, and the one thing that kept me going was knowing that we were a team in this fight. I remember looking at her tiny, frail body in the hospital bed, with wires and IVs running everywhere, and feeling this fierce, protective love. My whole life became a frantic race to raise money. Every bake sale, every charity marathon, every late night filling out grant applications. It was exhausting, but every dollar was a promise of a future for my little girl. Michael was supposed to be a part of that. He was a charismatic man, a salesman with an easy smile. He was the one who helped me set up the online fundraising page, the one who spoke so passionately to our friends and family about Lily's fight. Everyone saw him as the devoted father, the man who was just as invested in saving our daughter as I was. God, what a fool I was. I was so blinded by my own hope and the trust I had in him that I didn't see the red flags. The late nights he started keeping, the hushed phone calls, the increasingly frantic look in his eyes whenever I asked about the fundraising numbers. He'd always brush me off with a casual, "Don't worry, Claire, I've got a plan. We're on track." And I believed him, because why wouldn't I? A man wouldn't steal from his own sick child. Right. My mind just couldn't comprehend that level of evil. The fundraising account was something we had built together, a symbol of our shared commitment to Lily's life. It felt untouchable, sacred. It was our lifeline. Until that morning, the memory of it is still so vivid. I was sitting at the kitchen table, sipping a cold cup of coffee while Lily drew a picture of a cat with a rainbow tail. The sun was streaming through the window, and for a moment, everything felt peaceful. I logged into the online account just to check on the progress. The page loaded, and I felt a wave of confusion wash over me. The number wasn't what I remembered. It was 0. I refreshed the page. 0. My hands started to shake. I called Michael. His phone went straight to voicemail. I called again. No answer. A cold knot formed in my stomach as I sat there, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. The funds were gone. Everything. And in that moment, I knew with a chilling certainty that my husband stole our daughter's medical fund. This was not a mistake. This was a calculated, heartless betrayal. And I was left with a blank screen, an empty future, and a daughter with only months left to live if we couldn't find a solution. My heart was racing, my breath coming in short, panicked gasps. The silence in the house, save for the quiet scratching of Lily's crayon, was deafening. I looked down at her, so innocent and full of life, completely unaware of the monstrous thing her father had just done. I felt this surge of pure, unadulterated rage. It was a cold, quiet anger that simmered just beneath the surface of my panic. But it was there, and it would change everything. The worst part wasn't the money. It was the fact that he was supposed to be her father, her protector. This wasn't just theft. It was the lowest form of human cruelty imaginable. A betrayal so profound, it had to be more than just a momentary lapse of judgment. It had to be a part of who he was, and I didn't know it yet. But this betrayal was just the beginning. It was time to get to the bottom of this. It took a few hours for the shock to wear off, for the icy panic to start thawing into a white-hot rage. My hands were still shaking, but now it wasn't from fear. It was from a burning need to understand how I could have been so blind. How could I have ever trusted him? But to understand that, you have to go back. You have to understand what my life was like before Lily and before Michael. You have to understand the family I came from. My father, Richard, was a successful real estate mogul. He built his empire from nothing, and he ruled our family with the same iron fist. But in his world, a family wasn't a team. It was a lineup. My older brother, James, was the quarterback, the golden boy. He was everything my dad wanted: confident, ruthless, a natural-born leader. And me, I was the cheerleader on the sidelines, the supportive, invisible one. My dad's love wasn't a given, it was a reward. And the only way to earn it was to be useful. James got a new sports car for his 16th birthday. I got a lecture on the importance of a good GPA. My dad would tell me, James is built for business. Claire, you're built to be the support system. Your job is to make sure he succeeds. It was a quiet kind of toxic. The kind that slowly chips away at your sense of self-worth until you believe you're only valuable as an accessory to someone else's success. I spent my whole life trying to be the perfect daughter, the supportive sister, the one who never caused trouble. And in the process, I learned how to put everyone else's needs before my own. That's what made Michael so appealing. He wasn't like my father or my brother. He wasn't a powerhouse. He was just a kind, easygoing guy with a great sense of humor. When we first met, he made me feel seen for the first time in my life. He'd look at me and say, Claire, you are incredible. Why does everyone else get to be the star when you're the one who holds it all together? He saw my quiet strength, not as a tool for someone else's success, but as a superpower. He made me feel like I was the main character in my own story. He was the one who encouraged me to pursue my degree in physical therapy, who celebrated my small victories, who treated me like a partner, not a sideline player. I remember when Lily was born, it was the first time I felt a love so profound. It terrified me. My life, my purpose, my very reason for being was no longer about supporting someone else. It was about protecting this tiny, helpless human being. But even that love wasn't without its challenges. Lily's diagnosis came like a gut punch, a rare, devastating genetic disorder that would require constant care, expensive treatments, and eventually, a bone marrow transplant. The cost of the surgery alone was astronomical. It was more money than I could ever hope to make on my own. That's when Michael stepped up. He was a natural at fundraising. His charm, his empathy, all the things I loved about him, he used them to rally our community. He'd stand on a stage and speak about our little girl with so much love and passion. He'd talk about her bravery, her infectious laugh, her beautiful spirit. People would line up to donate, moved by his words. I truly believed he was doing it for Lily, that his love for her was as fierce and unconditional as mine. I thought we were finally a real team, a family forged by a shared purpose. But my past had trained me for something I didn't even realize. It had trained me to be the supportive one, the one who trusts blindly, the one who hands over control because I'd spent my whole life being told my job was to follow, not to lead. I gave him access to the bank accounts, the passwords, the emails. I let him handle the finances while I handled Lily's care. I was the nurse, the researcher, the advocate. He was the breadwinner, the fundraiser, the pillar of strength. I was doing my job, the job I'd been trained for since childhood. I was trusting someone else to handle the things I wasn't built for. And that's how I missed it. All the subtle signs. The way he'd get a phone call and immediately leave the room. The new clothes, the expensive watch. I'd ask him about it, and he'd just say, "It's a new client. Babe, gotta look the part." I just assumed he was working hard for us, for Lily. I had no idea that while I was fighting for her life in a hospital room, he was fighting a different kind of war, a silent one, fueled by greed and addiction. I never saw the real monster lurking just beneath the surface of that charming smile. If you've ever had to deal with a golden child sibling, comment yes or no below. It makes me feel a little less alone knowing I'm not the only one. You know that saying, it's always darkest before the dawn. Well, for me, it was the opposite. Everything looked bright and shiny on the outside, and I was so convinced we were heading for a new dawn that I didn't see the storm brewing right under my nose. I threw myself into the grind. My life became a meticulously planned schedule of work, hospital visits, and fundraising. Every free moment, I was on my laptop, writing emails, sending out press releases to local news outlets, and updating Lily's GoFundMe page with new pictures and a running tally of our progress. Every donation, no matter how small, $5 from a stranger in Ohio, $20 from a family friend, felt like a lifeline. I felt a bond with every single person who contributed, a shared sense of humanity and hope. It wasn't just money, it was trust. Their trust in me, and my trust that we would get to our goal. Michael was the public face of it all. He was a natural at charity events. He'd stand on a small stage, a picture of Lily on the screen behind him, and tell our story. His voice would crack just enough to make it believable. His eyes would get teary, just enough to make people reach for their wallets. He'd talk about Lily's bravery, how her smile could light up a room even on her toughest days. He was so good at it. I felt a surge of pride every time I watched him. He wasn't just my ex-husband. He was my partner in this fight. He was the one who could move mountains with his words, and I was the one who was quietly moving them with my hands. But as our campaign grew, so did the distance between us. Our conversations were all business now. Did you get that check from the church? How much did the bake sale raise? He started taking longer to reply to my texts. When I would ask him about it, he'd just sigh and say, "Claire, I'm getting burnt out. This is a lot of pressure. You know, it's not easy for me to be this vulnerable." And I would immediately feel guilty. He was right. It wasn't easy. I was so focused on validating his feelings that I completely ignored my own nagging intuition. I started to notice other things too. He'd be on the phone, and as soon as I walked into the room, he'd end the call abruptly. "Just a client," he'd mumble, a little too quickly. He started dressing differently: sleek new suits, designer watches. When I asked him where the money came from, he'd just say, "A bonus from a big sale. I'm a great closer. Remember." And a part of me did remember. The charming, charismatic man who could sell anything to anyone. I wanted to believe him. It was easier to believe that he was a brilliant salesman than a man hiding something from me. I remember one night. I stayed up late to update the fundraising page. We were so close to our goal. I was exhausted, my eyes burning from staring at the computer screen, but I couldn't stop. We were at $492,000, just $8,000 more, and Lily could get on the list for a transplant. It was a victory I could almost taste. I closed my laptop, my heart swelling with gratitude for every single person who helped us get here. And then I heard it. A quiet, muffled phone call coming from the hallway. I walked out of the bedroom and saw Michael standing there, his back to me, talking in a low, intense voice. "I told you I'd get the money. Okay, just give me another week. This is a sure thing. Trust me." My heart sank. A sure thing. What was he talking about? When he turned around and saw me, his face went pale. He quickly hung up the phone. "Claire, hey, you're still up," he said, forcing a smile. "Who was that?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "Just a buddy," he said, turning away. "Talking about an old client deal. Nothing you need to worry about." But it was everything I needed to worry about. The "just a buddy" part felt too rehearsed, too fake. My mind raced. Why would a client deal be discussed in such hushed, secretive tones at 1 a.m? It didn't add up. But I pushed the thought away. I had to. The bone marrow transplant was so close. The money was so close. I couldn't afford to rock the boat, to start a fight with the man who held the key to my daughter's future. He was my partner. He was fighting for us. Right. What I didn't know then was that his fight wasn't for us at all. It was against us. He wasn't building a future for Lily. He was building his own reckless, selfish fantasy. And all the while, I was his unwitting accomplice. I was so convinced that my sacrifice would lead to a victory, that I never saw the truth. I never realized that every penny, every lie, every hidden phone call was a step closer to the very thing I was trying to prevent: a complete and utter disaster. I just had no idea that my sacrifice would be the very thing that led to the tragedy that would unfold just a few months later. The turning point wasn't a sudden crash or a dramatic blowout. It was a slow, quiet unraveling, like a sweater being picked apart thread by thread until there was nothing left but a tangled mess. The pressure of getting Lily her transplant was at an all-time high. Our last conversation with the doctor was a sobering one. The window is closing. "Claire," she'd said gently, "Lily's condition is stable, but we can't wait forever. When you have the funds, let me know. We'll get her on the list." That night, I told Michael we had reached the $500,000 mark. He was quiet for a second, a strange flicker of something unreadable in his eyes. He said nothing. The air between us was thick with tension, with a silence I now know was filled with 1,000 lies. It was a silence that would consume our lives in the coming days. I remember the day I had planned to call the hospital to tell them we had the money. It was a Tuesday. I had a rare day off, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I was planning a normal day with Lily, a trip to the park, a picnic, simple things that most families take for granted. We even decided to invite Michael to join us. I wanted to celebrate. I wanted him to see the joy on Lily's face, to feel the relief that we had finally done it. This was a moment we had been working towards for years. When I called him to confirm, he sounded distracted. "Oh, yeah, about that. Claire, I can't make it. My mom's having a party for my brother. You know, since he's getting that big promotion." My stomach dropped. I knew about the party, but I thought it was just a small get-together. "A party?" I asked, a tremor in my voice. "But this is a huge day for us. Michael, it's about Lily's transplant." There was a long pause on his end. I could almost picture the gears turning in his head, trying to find a plausible excuse. "Look, Claire, I'm sorry. This is a family thing. I have to be there for my mom and James." His voice was flat, devoid of the emotion he used so expertly at fundraising events. "It's just a picnic." "Right. You can celebrate without me. Besides, I'll see you guys later." He hung up before I could say another word. I felt a cold dread creep into my heart. This wasn't just a simple mix-up. This was a choice. My daughter's life-saving surgery versus his brother's promotion party. It was a harsh, ugly truth that hit me with the force of a physical blow. He wasn't choosing his family, he was choosing his brother. I sat there in stunned silence, holding the phone in my hand, feeling my world shatter around me. The sun streaming through the window now felt cold and harsh, and the happy family I had envisioned just minutes ago was a cruel joke. I didn't go to the park. I couldn't. I spent the day numbly going through the motions, trying to process his utter lack of empathy. I tried to make sense of it. Maybe he was just tired of the hospital. Maybe he needed a break. But deep down, I knew that was a lie I was telling myself. His indifference was a slap in the face. It wasn't just about the party. It was about his complete detachment from Lily's suffering, from our struggles. His only concern was keeping up appearances, being the golden son, the successful brother. It was all a performance, and I was the fool who had bought into it. That evening, I drove by his mother's house. The front yard was filled with expensive cars. The house was lit up like a Christmas tree, and the sound of laughter and music spilled out onto the street. Through the window, I saw Michael. He was laughing, drink in hand, his arm around his brother James. They looked happy, carefree, as if nothing mattered outside the perfect, golden world they inhabited. It was a sickening scene, a stark contrast to the quiet, desperate life Lily and I were living. I thought about the money in the bank, our $500,000. I felt a fleeting sense of power, a sense of control. This was a victory they didn't share. This was something I had done for Lily, for our future. It was a silent testament to my love and a quiet rebellion against the family who had always put me last. But I was wrong. The triumph I felt was short-lived, replaced by a gut-wrenching realization. The next morning, I went to call the hospital to tell them we were ready to proceed with Lily's transplant. But before I made the call, I decided to check the bank account one last time, just to be sure. My hands trembled as I logged in. The page loaded, and my blood ran cold. The balance wasn't what I had remembered. It was 0. My breath caught in my throat. I refreshed the page. No change. Every single cent was gone. Every bake sale, every grant, every late night, every moment of hope, all for nothing. It was the moment my life ended, replaced by an empty screen and an even emptier future. I didn't know it then, but this was just the beginning of the end. And the true villain in this story was hiding in plain sight. I stood there, staring at the screen, a suffocating silence filling the kitchen. The peaceful morning had shattered. I felt like I was drowning, completely paralyzed by the betrayal. The first thing I did was call him. I must have called Michael a dozen times, but it went straight to his voicemail every single time. The person you are trying to reach is not available. A robotic voice chirped. It was a cold, cruel echo of my reality. He wasn't just unavailable, he was gone. My next move was to find his mom. I thought maybe, just maybe, she knew something. I drove over to her house, but there was no one home. The curtains were drawn, the driveway was empty. It was like they had all vanished into thin air. A knot of panic tightened in my chest. I felt so incredibly alone. My daughter's future, my entire world, had just been stolen, and there was no one to turn to. I felt like a ghost, haunting the empty spaces of the life I had worked so hard to build. My thoughts were a chaotic mess. Why? Why would he do this for what? What was so important that he would gamble with his own daughter's life? The man I had once loved, the man I had trusted, was a monster in disguise. The tears I had been holding back finally came, a flood of grief and anger that I couldn't control. I sat in my car, parked on the street outside his mom's house, and sobbed, my body shaking with every breath. I felt a pain so deep, so profound, that it was almost physical. It was during this moment of absolute despair that my phone rang. I looked at the screen, and my heart nearly stopped. It was a number I didn't recognize. I hesitated for a moment, then answered. "Hello," I said, my voice hoarse. A deep, steady voice on the other end spoke. "Claire, this is Richard. Claire, are you okay? I've been watching the donation page. I know something is wrong." My stomach dropped. Richard, my father. I hadn't spoken to him in years. He was the one who had always put me last, the one who had called me the supportive one. His voice, once so cold and distant, now sounded filled with a quiet concern I had never heard before. "Dad," I whispered, my voice trembling. How did you know to call me?" He didn't answer right away. "Claire, I know about the missing money. I know about Michael. And I know about the gambling." My mind reeled. How could he possibly know I hadn't told anyone? "I don't understand," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "How do you know this?" He let out a long sigh on the other end of the line. "Claire, I'm your father. I may not have been there for you, but I've always been there for Lily. I have people who keep an eye on things, and my people have been keeping an eye on your ex-husband for a long time." My mind raced. "What do you mean? You've been keeping an eye on him, and why I asked." My voice laced with suspicion. "I'm a private man. Claire, I don't like to get involved in people's lives. But Lily is my granddaughter. When you get a moment, call me. We need to talk. This isn't something you should face alone." The phone clicked, and he was gone. I sat there in stunned silence, a million thoughts racing through my mind. He knew about the money, about Michael, about the gambling, how and why. It was all so surreal. Just an hour ago, I was completely alone. But now, A man I hadn't spoken to in years was on the other end of the line, telling me he had been watching me, protecting me, and my daughter. The pain and grief I had felt moments before were now replaced by a chilling sense of unease. My father, the man who had always been so cold and distant, was suddenly here. It was a twist I never saw coming. I had been so focused on Michael's betrayal that I hadn't stopped to consider that someone else, someone I had completely written off, was the key to all of this. My life, which I had always thought was a simple story of good versus evil, was suddenly a complex web of lies and secrets. The feeling of utter despair was now replaced by something else, a cold, hard determination. I was going to find out the truth, no matter what. And I was going to get my daughter's money back. I just didn't know what that would cost me. I didn't have to wait long. The very next day, my phone rang again. It was my dad. "I'm sending a car for you, Claire. It'll be there in 20 minutes. I have something to show you." His voice was different now, not the distant, cold tone I was used to, but a tone of quiet authority. I didn't question it. I packed a small bag, kissed a sleeping Lily on the forehead, and waited. A black town car pulled up to my curb, looking completely out of place on our quiet suburban street. The driver, a polite man with a gentle smile, nodded to me. I got in, feeling a mix of dread and a strange, unfamiliar hope. The car was silent, and I spent the entire ride staring out the window, watching the familiar streets blur into an unrecognizable landscape of office buildings and skyscrapers. I was being pulled into a world I had never known. We arrived at a sleek, glass-fronted building in the heart of the city, the kind of place you see in movies, with a doorman in a uniform and a lobby so clean you could eat off the floor. We took the elevator up to the top floor, and as the doors opened, I saw my father standing there, waiting. He looked older than I remembered, but he still had that same intimidating aura, that same stern look in his eyes. He motioned for me to follow him, and we walked into a spacious office with a stunning view of the skyline. He sat down at his desk and gestured for me to take a seat. "I have something to show you," he said, his voice flat. He pulled out a large manila envelope and slid it across the desk. My hands were shaking as I opened it. Inside were stacks of legal documents and photos. My heart hammered against my ribs as I looked at them. Photos of Michael at a high-stakes poker table. Stacks of chips piled high. Photos of him leaving a seedy backroom casino. Documents showing massive bank transfers, all sent to an offshore account. It was a complete and utter timeline of his betrayal, stretching back for years. "I had him followed," my dad said, his voice hard. "I've had him followed since the day you divorced. He was never a good man. Claire, I knew that. I wanted to warn you, but you were so set on him. I had a feeling he would try something like this, so I hired a team to watch him. They've been documenting his every move." The anger I had felt earlier was now replaced by a chilling sense of shock. My father, a man I thought didn't care about me, had been protecting me all this time. He was a silent guardian, a shadow in the background. Then he pulled out a second document, a legal will. "This is from Michael's mother," he said. She was a shrewd woman. She knew about his gambling addiction. She knew he would blow through any inheritance she left him. So she put a clause in her will. She didn't leave him a single penny. She left it all to one trust. The trust she left was for Lily. She made sure that he could never touch a dime of it, not a single cent. My mind reeled. It was true. The money wasn't gone. It had never been in Michael's account to begin with. It was in a trust that he had no access to, no way of touching. It was there, safe and sound, all along. And the person who had made sure of it was the very person I had thought would betray me. The very person who had always put me last. My heart ached for her. She had died trying to protect her granddaughter from her own son. It was a love that was so deep and so unconditional. It was a love I had never seen before. But then my father pulled out a third document, a transcript of a phone call. I read it, and my blood ran cold. It was a conversation between Michael and a friend. He was on the phone, a few weeks ago, laughing. I'm a genius. Man, I got her to give me full access to the account. She thinks she's helping her daughter. I'm going to use it all to pay off my debts. And then I'm gone. I'll make a run for it. My hands started to shake, and I felt a wave of nausea. He wasn't just a monster. He was a sociopath. He had no remorse, no guilt, no conscience. He was just using me, using Lily, for his own selfish gain. I have more than this. Claire, my dad said, his voice calm. I have recordings of all of his conversations. I have proof of every dime he's ever stolen. I have everything. Now, what do you want to do? I looked at him, my mind a jumble of emotions. I wanted to cry, to scream, to fall apart, but I couldn't. I had to be strong for Lily. I had to fight. For the first time in my life, I wasn't just fighting for myself. I was fighting for my daughter. I was fighting to protect her from the man who had abandoned her, the man who had gambled away her life. I looked at my dad, and I saw a man who had always been there for me, even when I didn't know it. And I knew what I had to do. I took a deep breath. I want him to pay, I said, my voice steady. I want him to lose everything he has, and I want him to know that he can never touch us again. My dad nodded. Good, because he's about to have the worst day of his life. After the confrontation, the chaos slowly began to settle. The days that followed were a blur of legal meetings, police interviews, and doctor's appointments. Michael was arrested at the gala, and the scandal was everywhere. News outlets ran with the story of the corrupt father who gambled away his daughter's life savings. It was a humiliating public spectacle, and a part of me felt a grim satisfaction in watching his carefully constructed life unravel. He was no longer the charming, charismatic salesman. He was just a desperate, selfish man. The man who had once sold me a beautiful lie was now the subject of a cold, hard truth. But even as his world fell apart, my world slowly began to heal. My father was a man of his word. He used his connections to get Lily into one of the best hospitals in the country. He found the perfect bone marrow donor, a young woman who was a perfect match for Lily. The doctors were optimistic, and for the first time in years, I allowed myself to hope. The surgery was a success. Lily's body was weak, but her spirit was as strong as ever. She was a fighter. She always had been. It's strange to think that the worst thing that had ever happened to me was also the best thing. It forced me to face a lot of hard truths about Michael, about my family, and about myself. I had spent my whole life being the supportive one, the one who put everyone else's needs before my own. But after everything that had happened, I learned that my own worth was not tied to my ability to support others. I was worthy of love and happiness and a future, all on my own. My relationship with my father changed, too. He was still a private man, but he was no longer a stranger. He'd call to check on Lily, to ask about her progress. He'd send flowers, books, and little gifts. He never apologized for the past, but he didn't need to. His actions spoke louder than any words ever could. He was there for us, and that was all that mattered. I realized he was a man who didn't know how to show his love, but he knew how to fight for the people he cared about. It was a different kind of love, a quiet, fierce, and unwavering kind of love, a love that I now cherished more than anything. As for Lily, she's thriving. She's a happy, healthy little girl, full of life and laughter. She doesn't remember the fundraising, the hospital visits, or the constant fear. She just remembers a new beginning. She's a symbol of hope, a beacon of light in a dark world. She's a reminder that even when things seem impossible, there is always a way. Looking back, I don't feel anger anymore. I feel peace. I've found a sense of calm that I never thought was possible. My life is still complicated, but it's full of love and hope and a future that's brighter than I ever could have imagined. I learned that you can't control what people do, but you can control how you react. You can choose to be a victim, or you can choose to be a survivor. And I chose to survive. I chose to fight, and I chose to win. If you've ever felt betrayed by someone you love, you are not alone. And I want you to know that your story isn't over. You have the power to write your own ending, to take control of your life and build a future that is truly yours. My story is living proof that you can. If this story touched you, if it gave you hope, if it made you believe that there's always a way, then hit that like button right now. And if you want to see how my family recovered and thrived, how we built a new life from the ashes, then leave a comment below and let me know your thoughts. What part of my story resonated with you the most? And if you want to be a part of a community that understands, a community that knows what it's like to fight for what's right, then hit that subscribe button. It's more than just a button. It's a promise to yourself that you'll never let anyone take your power away again. Subscribe now and join a community that fights for justice, believes in hope, and knows that the people who love you most might be the ones you least expect.